All right. We're back for another episode of the Bad Ideas Podcast with Marianne Boone. How are
I'm
you?
great. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm good. I said Marianne. It's
It's
Marianne,
Marianne.
correct?
Yeah,
I know. We just practiced it, and then I stepped on my
that's
minus 10 points for Nick to start this. We'll have to make up for it as
no
we go.
worries.
So excited to talk to you because you have a really awesome background, and now you're advising a ton of companies. So you're somebody who's kind of taken the entire career trajectory with a very large organization, and now you're applying that to a bunch of smaller ones. So I think people who listen in and hear us brainstorm together will learn from you, but also do so knowing that in theory, if they fall into your purview, maybe they could find a way to win some of your attention too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess, in year 38 of my operations journey.
I don't
Yeah,
believe
I
it.
know. It's crazy. Most of that time I spent with a very large legal technology platform, online, print.
Mhm.
Actually, I've seen everything from, believe it or not, IBM punch cards through digital transformation and now stepping into the AI space. So I've had a lot of small teams, large teams, uh, technology teams, print teams, all the way, composition, and then a lot of just online stuff. And when I started, like I said, it was IBM punch cards. And so then we had to go through just getting on IBM computers, and then the whole digital transformation to
Mhm.
mobile, and all kinds of really being media neutral in terms of how customers could get content. And then I've kind of turned that into a consulting business where I've worked with actually a lot of different types of industries, but it's all operational. It's all the kinds of things that matter, operations being kind of the engine that runs everything. So those are like transferable skills in terms of what builds great teams, what does training look like, especially now. Most of the questions I get are around how do we implement artificial intelligence in our small, medium, or large scale up.
So we can fundraise on
Yeah,
it.
yeah. And it's
Yeah.
really, it's different. It's not an all or nothing proposition. So I'm doing a lot of work in that space. I've done some, with retail, manufacturing. I'm getting a lot of questions from people who want to be disruptors in the legal information space. I think,
Because of where you come from.
yeah, because early on it was kind of like there were a couple big players, and it was all about, content is king. You had to have all the content. Now I think that's probably less true. So that's
Because now AI has all the content.
right,
We just,
right. And with AI so easily able to curate content and to surface what's important, there's a lot more opportunity, I think, for people to break into that space.
yeah, yeah. I love that you have an operations background, and I think it's been one of my fascinations since we started the show in operations because the big differentiator between like amazing ideas and amazing companies is operations. And as much as people will say like the founder was a visionary and he raised all this money or whatever, I've personally worked at companies with unbelievable founders who were great at fundraising, but couldn't put like a effective organization together to bring the vision to
Hmm.
life. And that's like in building my companies, that's 90% of the time goes to finding people who are organized and consistent and can make things repeatable, like break them down so people can quickly come in and be onboarded and effective right away. Those are the things that make the big difference. And it was like coming from outside, coming from the venture space, you almost think it's like it's the idea and the excitement around the company that makes it successful. But when you're actually working in a business, it's the consistency that the company is able to deliver the same goods or services over and over again. And that's pure operations. So grateful to have you here, especially now that you're like doing this for a bunch of companies. So hopefully they'll know that the stuff they learned from you today, maybe they could learn from you personally in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm really glad to be invited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So you're, just to get the name out there. So Front Range Leadership Development is your company, right?
Yes. And the website is Front Range Leadership Dev, made it a little shorter, all one word,
Mm-hmm.
.com. And I invite people, there's a lot of lists of services and things that I offer there. Also just open to conversations because things are changing so rapidly now. Sometimes people don't know what they need until they get into conversation about what's working and what's not working.
And nobody ever does, right? Or they have an idea of what they need, but they don't know how to solve it.
Totally.
I've,
Totally.
I've been in
Yeah.
those
And
shoes.
that's the hard thing is that the more the more a company is successful, the more convinced the people in the company become that they have the answers. And oftentimes it's somebody from outside that can just give a little twist that makes the difference.
Yeah, yeah. And operations is such an interesting area because it touches everything. Um, and it's hard for someone to build a career in operations consulting. Like you have to be inside an organization
Yes.
and building and running the teams as the company grows to really learn how it
Yeah.
works. So that's what you folks like you are kind of rare that have done that at such a high level over such a long trajectory, that are now available externally. It just doesn't happen very
Yeah.
often.
I think that's true.
Yeah. Um, Over the course of your career, what percentage of the ideas floated by you were good and what percentage were bad?
That's a great question. I would say probably 30% were good ideas, 70% were
Oof.
probably bad. But we took the 70% and sometimes we could take some piece of it and make it into something doable. A lot of times the what makes an idea bad is that internally we decided that this is a great thing that customers should want, and then you find out that nobody wants it. I think maybe Steve Jobs is probably one of the only people who could convince people they needed something that they'd never heard of before. So yeah, and then the other thing,
I'm convinced he was an
yeah,
alien, so he
yeah.
doesn't
But
really
then the
count
other
as
thing
like a
I think
people.
we would
Yeah.
have great ideas that were very difficult to operationalize. So you get things that are just way too expensive to scale, even though they sound like
Or too
yeah,
complex.
yeah,
My
yes.
Achilles heel. I'll get inspired and start mapping something out, and then my team will look at me and be like, "We don't have the bodies. It's not going to happen." And it's just like, okay,
Yeah, no, exactly right.
all right, all right. Well, crack your knuckles. Do you feel like looking at a bad idea with me?
Let's do it.
All right, let's see what we got today. Our bad idea is Pivot Palooza Partners, a firm that advises businesses to pivot their entire strategy every quarter based on a proprietary trend forecasting algorithm, quote unquote, a magic eight ball, with no responsibility for the resulting chaos. This sounds like a shot at consulting. It doesn't sound like a real business idea. It sounds almost like a shot at advisory or like management consulting
It
firms.
does. It sounds like people who've had bad experiences hiring consultants. That's
Yeah.
very funny. Yeah, I love the part about no responsibility for the resulting chaos. That's what I always wanted in
Yeah.
my career. Yeah, we can try that.
Well, yeah, and you see how it goes. I think that a lot of people, well, a lot of the folks I know, particularly the startup leaders who never work with a big consulting firm, misunderstand like the purpose of the big consulting businesses. And I think like, there's access to a lot of information, but at the end of the day, someone's just paying for validation of their own idea, right?
Yes.
Like they're not really looking for external expertise. They're looking for someone to build a long deck full of research with a big logo on it that says this is a good plan.
That's how it
Um,
often goes. And I've been
yeah.
involved in my career with outside consultants that came in to try to overhaul our operations in the name of efficiency and cost savings. I think the challenge with that is that they almost never learn enough about your customers, your
Mhm.
stakeholders, your products and services to do much more than tell you that your ideas are either great or just you should throw that one out, it's horrible.
Yeah. But it's a flawed model. Like as an outside operator, it's really hard to get to a place where you can do that. I think in your situation, it's different because you have experience you can immediately overlay onto whatever you're looking at.
Yeah.
Um, but when you get a McKinsey consultant that got their MBA in March of this year, like they're not going to be able to do that. They have tools and they have access to a big database, but that's it.
Yes.
Um, so this, let me read it to you
Okay.
again. This seems so. Pivot Palooza Partners, a firm that advises businesses to pivot their entire strategy every quarter based on a proprietary trend forecasting algorithm. Okay, so it's kind of taking a shot at consulting firms, but there's also this like we see the future. We have something that's going to predict where the markets are going to go. So you're going to outsource your strategy to us
Hmm.
so we can choose when you pivot and force the pivots based on what we think is going to happen next.
Yeah, which the magic 8 ball would be great. I would still challenge the entire pivot quarterly. I mean, as you know, any to lay out a strategy takes longer than a quarter. To
Mhm.
execute on a strategy is going to take,
Yeah.
probably more than a year. I mean, a year would be great. Usually it's like a 3 to 5 year plan. I know things are changing faster now, but quarterly would just be insane.
So let's unpack insane. I've got a thought
All right.
process for you. Have you read much about Elon Musk?
Not a lot.
Uh, I'm a mid 30s super geek, so of course I read a lot about what he's doing and how he builds so fast. And it seems like um, a lot of his strategy is setting goals that are like ambitious but out of reach. In an office composed of extreme overachievers that all want to be like the one to hit
Mm,
the goal to impress the guy type of thing. Um, but that gives him the leverage to constantly steer where the business is pushing and ensure that they're moving as fast as they possibly
mhm,
can. Um, and this is a long way of me getting back to he probably introduces new targets more frequently than every quarter. I'm sure there's a big target they're building towards, but um, I found that whenever you approach a major problem or a major project, the first sprint of building all the blocks and figuring out like where you're going to go and where you're going to change, that's when all of like the wins reveal themselves. And then, like you said, it takes time to break it down and operationalize it and really glue it into the business. But I'm almost wondering if something like forcing a major shift in thinking every quarter could shake out more of those big strides forward. Um, I mean, it's almost more like the purpose of a business retreat, except the retreat is to kind of rebuild
mhm,
everything from
mhm.
scratch as a thought exercise. Have you ever had experience with stuff like that?
No, kind of the way the organizations I've worked in have operated is
Yeah,
more like you set the strategy, and it's kind of like steering the big ship, and within that you move people around. So you have
mm-hmm.
leaders that move around every 18 months or so, and so that's how you bring.
So they don't get
Yeah,
entrenched,
and you
you
get new thoughts and new visions around kind of the overall strategy. I think Musk's
Interesting,
business is a little bit unique in comparison to some others in the sense that
for sure.
it's the whole business model is just, you know, breaking
Speed.
things and changing things and doing outrageous
Yeah,
things. And the other thing I wonder about, and this is now I'm kind of interested to read more about him and his leadership style,
yeah.
is, have you heard of the Google project Aristotle? Okay,
No,
so
tell me
that's an
about it.
interesting read. A number of years ago, probably more than 8 now, Google did a study to figure out what made their teams successful. Like, why were their most high performing teams high performing? So they tried to figure
Mm-hmm.
out, in studying over 200 teams, what made some teams better than others. And there are about 5 items, but the number one predictor of success was psychological safety. And so if
Hmm.
you think about an office where everybody's like a super high performer and it's cutthroat and everybody's trying to, be the
Yeah.
one, that's really low psychological safety. I'm curious how that
Hmm.
model plays out over time versus a model where, there's psychological safety as a foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the way you talked about moving leaders, like rotating leaders every 18 months, it's almost the same thing, except instead of pivoting the strategy, you're pivoting the people working on the
Yes.
strategy. So you're still forcing a fresh perspective. You're just not changing the path that you're on
Right.
to get it. You're changing the environment that the path is
Right.
in, um, which is cool. It's kind of like the same thing. So if we put that into our bad idea, so it'd be like team pivot partners or like team roulette or something. So it's the same strategy, but every year and a half, everyone gets shuffled to a new place, so they have to understand it inside and
Yeah.
out and be able to approach it from multiple
Yeah,
areas.
I do agree the overall time frame for setting reevaluating strategies is shrinking because of
Hmm.
AI. Like the example I
So
used at the
fast.
beginning where, legal technology platforms that had all of the content really were keeping other players out, even some
Hmm.
disruptors that came out and had uh, kind of the pre-AI graphical interface, something that the big players didn't have. They
Hmm.
didn't they were limited in the sense that they didn't have enough content to test it with. Now I think all bets are off. You look at the amount of information that Chat GPT
Yeah.
has learned on and is getting
Everything.
fed every day. And so I think there's a much better opportunity, not just in that space, but in a lot of businesses for disruption.
Hmm. Interesting. So when everything around you, when the environment is moving faster, I mean, does that strategy still hold, shifting the leaders periodically, but aligned to the same strategy? Do you think you just do it more frequently?
Well, as long as, and this is where the culture gets really important, as long as
Hmm.
everybody, no matter where they're shifting, as long as the leadership and the C suite are all absolutely on the same page at all times and everybody's rowing in the same direction. That's where I'm talking about psychological safety being such a driving force because as we know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it doesn't matter how great your strategy is. If your culture stinks, then you're not going to hit your targets over time. So I
Yeah.
think if you,
Tell us, unpack that for us. What does culture mean to you?
so culture is mostly the unwritten rules of how organizations operate. So it's the politics that we don't really, it's not written down anywhere. It's the mores about how people communicate. Is it a top down only organization? Is it kind of egalitarian? Is it a mix? And a lot of that stuff, people just, you start a job and you get in the organization. That's when you figure out what the culture is.
Yeah,
I always like talking to people about their culture and asking about the culture because most people,
we have a great culture.
or they say things like it's fast paced. Okay, well, what does that mean? You can be a fast paced culture with high psychological safety, and you can be a fast paced culture where everybody's stabbing each other in the back. So yeah, so I think it's the how you do what you do. That's what culture is.
Together, right?
Yes,
Together is the operating word.
yes,
Yeah,
together.
yeah. That's one I've been reading about a lot lately. Like, what is culture? How do you establish it? How does it scale? Because you're right. One of the things that I forget what I read recently said, like culture was the glue that allowed them to go from 10 people to 200 people, without a significant change in senior leadership. Um,
Hmm.
so, like you said, like the unwritten rules of the organization were transferable to all the new hires, so it continued to work the same way.
Yes. And some of
Um,
the best
but who?
cultures, I think, are the ones that understand what their culture is. And when you join the organization, they're transparent about what that is, they can articulate it, and you find out that what they say about it is true. For example, if they
Yeah.
say, you know, all ideas are welcomed here. Okay, a lot of people say that. It's not true,
And they're not.
yeah, in a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
places. So it's really important to understand what your culture is, to be able to articulate it, and then have that really lived out day to day.
Who's responsible for implementing the culture?
Well, ultimately, it's everybody, right? But if everyone's responsible, no one is. So
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, most of our organizations are still pyramid structures. So it's like the CEO really sets the tone of the culture. And then it's that person needs to make all of the leaders below at each level of the organization equally responsible for maintaining that culture. I met with a CEO one time and he said, if you had my job, what would you do? And I thought, well, that's a loaded question. But what I focused on was culture. I'm like,
First?
he was Harvard educated, and I'm like, I'm sure you're better at your job than I'll ever be. But if I were in your job, I would pay attention to that sort of middle layer of management in an organization, because those people touch more of your employees than you ever will. And your employers are going to determine what kind of service your customers get. And so, and that was really, I was speaking about culture. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So he wasn't impressed by that
Interesting.
answer, by the way.
So it starts with the CEO, but it's still this kind of nebulous thing that's just understood or learned and adopted.
It is, but you can make it less nebulous by talking about it, calling it out. HR has to be on board with this culture, and it has to, for example, it has to play out. If you say all ideas are welcome, you have to ensure that in every
You're
space
listening.
where meetings are happening, that's really true. And one of the ways that I used to do that was we had a rotating sort of devil's advocate position. So somebody would be assigned, you're the dissenter today, and everybody's ideas, you're going to argue the opposite. And when you rotate that, then it's not always Joe who's the bad guy.
Hmm. That's a really cool idea. How do how do you look at culture? How do you like evaluate it from an external or new employee, for example?
A lot of it has to do with the the lived experiences of employees. So in psychological safety, I think one of the best ways Dr. Amy Edmondson has done the most work, taking sort of the Aristotle project forward. She's written several books about psychological safety. Her first one's called The Fearless Organization. And
Hmm.
she developed a survey. It's like 7 questions. And so, she would go into organizations and just survey all the employees. And it gets to things like how risk tolerant is the organization? Is it okay to make a mistake? Is everyone's idea really listened to? Do you feel like people on your team would undermine you? Those kinds of things. And so, really, it's just whether you do that or something else, it's really asking everybody and having open conversations about how they experience the culture of the organization.
Is that something you find yourself looking at when you take on a new client or come into a new project?
100%. That's the first thing.
Really?
Sometimes they're not open to, like, they don't want to be surveyed. That's all right. But I start with, what are your goals? What are the three top challenges you have? What are the three top things you're trying to accomplish in the next 18 months to 3 years? And then when we
Mhm.
start talking about what makes those things difficult, it always comes back to culture. Then we start having real conversations about the challenges they're having, how that plays out in culture. Is it communication? Is it, a toxic relationship with bosses? I think still the number one reason people leave jobs is their boss. So ultimately that is the place I start, but that's not the first question I ask because most people either haven't heard of it or it just sounds too I don't know what the word is. It's not concrete enough.
Judgmental?
Yeah, like they don't.
Yeah.
It's like just tell me the things I need to do in my operations to make the revenue numbers, and people
Hmm.
skip over culture a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I'm going to use a silly analogy because I read a lot about smart things and a lot about not smart things too. And this is one of the not smart things. Um, in Boston. I'm a Patriots fan, and the Patriots have been terrible the last 4 years. So I read furiously for reasons to hope that they won't be this year. Um, but the coach they brought in as a former player is actually one of my favorite players on the team, and he's focused almost exclusively on culture the last 4 months. So the free agents they brought in, the people they released, like he released the former captains, brought in free agents, but everyone has this type of character, this team character, where it's always about the team before them. They don't want attention, they don't want fame, they want to win. Um, and he's kind of made himself famous for putting on pads himself
Mhm.
when the team practices. So it's this culture of we're all in this together. I'm the head coach on the field with you. Um, and he's had a lot of success with that over his coaching career. His teams have always played super hard for him. Regardless of the makeup of the team, even without superstars, they still kind of outplay their talent level. And I think that speaks to what you're talking about. Like even without the best coordinator or the best wide receivers or the best quarterback, you can still become a playoff team if the unit is performing at a certain level, because that's just the standard that's been set.
Yeah,
Maybe culture can do
no,
that.
that's really actually a great example of culture at work where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. The only way that
Mm-hmm.
happens is with really effective, functioning cultures, and that's a great way to do it. That reminds me of the. Have you watched that Apple TV show Ted Lasso?
Yeah, amazing, amazing show.
Love that show, and
Yeah.
in fact, I was was going to assign that to some of my directors to watch because I
No
think
way.
it teaches some great things about leadership. And that
Yeah.
has, when people are heard, understood, they feel a part of something, and that is really fostered, their performance goes up, full stop.
Yeah. That's like the whole theme of the show. He doesn't even know anything about
I
soccer,
know.
but coaches a winning team.
Yeah,
But you feel it. You feel his investment in the players.
totally.
You know,
And
that's a
that
pretty special
makes,
thing.
to your point, a bigger difference than how much he doesn't know about soccer. And that was kind of the point
Yeah.
to my staff is, we tend to promote people who learn a lot about the product or the service and they have a track record for performance. We spend less time teaching them about how to be great leaders. And that's really what makes a bigger difference than knowing a lot of stuff.
How do you teach someone to be a great leader?
Well, make them watch Ted Lasso.
All
No, I
right.
mean, I think it's interesting. To be honest, not everybody will learn. Some people are natural leaders. I do think some people are born that way. Other people, I'll use myself as an example. When I had my first role as a manager, I think that was 26, and I suddenly had 35 direct reports. And I
Jeez.
recognized, because I'm pretty introspective, I recognized the gaps in my skill sets. And a lot of it had to do around the people part of it, right? And it was one of those situations where I was great at the job. I was like the top performer. Then I'm promoted. It's the Peter principle, right? So I'm promoted into a management role, and there's this whole other skill set that I didn't have. So I went out and got that. I went out and got training, and so I think you have to. I think it's a couple things. I think you are constantly having conversations with people, and when you ask, people will often tell you where they feel they have gaps. And if it's okay to talk about that, and I don't have to pretend like I know everything, if it's safe to talk of that, people will tell you. And then you help get them the training. I think it's training. I'm a big proponent of constant learning and training. I think
Mhm.
Microsoft, maybe as much as 10 years ago, shifted from doing performance evaluations where they kind of reviewed what you did last year and gave you a rating to becoming a learning organization where it's more about how much you learn, and that's what we talk about year over year. So I think you have to build that into the culture where we're
Mhm.
always having conversations about gaps, and we do leadership training regularly.
Mhm. It's a major thing because those are the pillars of your culture, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've had people who just, didn't take me up on it. I would, I have a conversation about, and sometimes they were in agreement about where they were less effective as a leader, but also
Mhm.
didn't want to do anything different. So that happens too. But
Yeah.
to your point, the sports example you gave was a really good one because that person was building his team by the character of the people that he was
Mhm.
recruiting. And so sometimes it comes down to that.
Yeah. It's it's wild to see. It gives me hope. We'll see if it pays off, but it's fun to read about for now, and it just really resonates with all the things you're saying here. Um, and I'm trying to anchor it back to a really bad idea to see if it can make this good somehow. But if I try, this is flailing.
Okay.
This is Nick flailing. If I flail a little bit and try to anchor these together, so we thought the value in the pivot palooza is not in pivoting the strategy, but to your point, actually pivoting the people that are operating the strategy.
Yes.
So people are getting multiple vantage points, but moving the company in the same direction. So fresh perspective, same direction seems to be good. And what we've discussed since then is how even more than strategy, culture is the indicator of success of the business. So if the people you're pivoting are the pillars of your culture, and a consistently fresh perspective helps you move faster. The only piece this business is kind of missing is a way to further develop those people while you're pivoting them.
Agreed. Yeah.
So pivoting helps you as the organization, but what do we have to do to help them
Right.
so they don't just feel like a cog?
Yeah. So each new role that they pivot to needs to come with some built in mechanism for upskilling. And now
Mm-hmm.
that's even potentially a little more complex because I would argue that not just in leadership roles, but probably throughout an organization, there needs to be some baseline understanding of artificial intelligence and how it could be implemented or is being implemented in that particular industry or company. So that's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of upskilling. And that's what I find companies are less good at.
So we're making a training company.
Yeah, yes.
So this isn't really a consulting firm at all. This is a training company that teaches you how to rotate and upskill
Yeah,
leaders.
that is a great idea, I think.
It's your idea. It's your idea. All right. All right. So Pivot Palooza, as bad as this name is, if it's not about the strategy and it's all about the people and it includes some sort of upskilling, you think that's a pretty good
I do
idea?
think that's a good idea. I wouldn't,
Mm.
yeah, I would not change the strategy every quarter. And I wouldn't change the people every quarter. I would give it a little bit longer time frame, but I think there's some legs there.
All right. Look at that. We fixed it. And we learned some things at the same time. This is good. Um, so now that everyone's heard you talk, I'm sure everyone is doing the same thing I did. I'm writing notes down over here, like how do I fix my culture, or how far off is my
Mm,
culture from where it should be to achieve my goals. So if people want to work through that with you, how do they get in touch?
yeah, I think the easiest way is to go to my website, frontrange.leadershipdev.com, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
contact form they can fill out. I'm responsive. I'll get back to people pretty quickly, and we just have a free consultation, talk about what they're looking for, and see if it's a good match.
That's amazing. We'll try to get a link into the YouTube and on LinkedIn when
Cool.
we put this out there.
Awesome.
But this is great. Thank you so much for joining
Well,
us.
thank you, Nick. It was a lot of fun. I love bad ideas.
Yeah, bad ideas. I learned a lot. I feel like I got a free consulting session
Oh, that's
here, and
awesome.
I'm literally gonna dig into our culture tomorrow morning. But thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Appreciate it.